Okie dokes. Right. Hello, folks. It's 6 o'clock, so we might as well get started. Big hello from me. I'm Jashan Johal. I'm a member of the Alumni Association Committee at the University of Leicester, and I'm extremely pleased that so many of my fellow alum are actually able to join us this evening. So no matter where you are from the world, in the world at the moment, I'd like to personally extend a very warm welcome to you as you join us for this Festival of Change event in conversation with none other than Octavia Goredema MBE. So just a few housekeeping rules before we start this evening. Please feel free to keep your videos on for the duration of today's event, but please keep your microphones on mute so that we can all hear Octavia's wisdom as we continue this evening. I'm sure many of you are now, like myself, pretty familiar when it comes to participating with such online events, given how many of us have probably joined so many across the last 2 years. But as a reminder, you can find the microphone and camera button at the bottom of your screen. And don't worry if you are struggling to mute yourself, a member of the alumni engagement team will be able to support you with this and turn it off on your behalf should we have any technical difficulties. Throughout our session, we're going to be asking a lot of questions to Octavia herself, but if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to put them in the chat window, as we can hopefully in our Q&A segment at the end get to them. Now, within the Alumni Association Committee, I am absolutely proud to be supporting the ongoing development of our ever-growing 200,000 global alumni community. And we, as the Alumni Association Committee, consider ourselves to be somewhat of a link between the university and the Alumni Association. And we're really proud to provide an additional opportunity for alum to ask questions and make suggestions. The committee is elected annually and meets regularly for committee meetings, and we hold an annual AGM in autumn, and you can find more about that on our website. And the link will also be shared in the chat box if it hasn't been done so already. There are a number of opportunities available for you as alum to support our university. For example, you can complete the Centenary Alumni Census, which is currently live until Monday, where you will play an active role in supporting one of our existing chapters. Submit an alumni profile or volunteer with the university. We also continue to announce new Centenary and Festival of Change events regularly, which are all free for alumni. And you're more than happy and welcome to attend where possible. Last few points from me before we get started. To stay in the loop with alumni news and events, please make sure that your contact details are up to date. And if you're a user of social media, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn using the hashtag and at Leicester Alumni. Finally, if you're interested in any of the opportunities mentioned, please let us know in the event evaluation form, which will be posted here in the chat at the end of today's event. And we really value all feedback that we receive, as it really helps us shape our events and better support our alumni community. Once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I really do hope you enjoy yourselves. I'm absolutely brimming with excitement. So I guess without further ado, it gives me absolute pleasure to introduce none other than Octavia Goredema MBE.
Oh, thank you so much, Jashan, for the warm welcome. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'm Octavia Goredema. I'm a career coach. I am passionate about helping others to do their best work. My company, 2010 Agency, works with companies like Google, American Airlines, Tinder, and Mattel to support the career advancement of their underrepresented professionals. I am all about identifying what it takes to help others become great leaders, continue their professional development, pay it forward, and support and enable others. During the pandemic, I co-hosted a weekly live show about leadership for Harvard Business Review. My co-hosts were R.D. Ignatius, the editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review, and Josh Markt, the CEO of Harvard Business Publishing. And each week for 11 weeks, we had a special guest who would come and join us live on our show. Our guests ranged from Walter Isaacson, the academic and author, to CEOs of companies such as PayPal. Dan Schulman joined us, Chuck Robbins of Cisco joined us, and we closed the season with Dr. Anthony Fauci. I am also a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. The RSA was founded in London almost 300 years ago and now represents 30,000 fellows, social innovators across the globe. I'm very proud to be one of them. Notable RSA fellows over the course of history include Charles Dickens and Marie Curie and Nelson Mandela and Benjamin Franklin. And I lead the Gender Equity Network for the RSA here in the United States. I moved to Los Angeles for the first time in 2005. But back in the UK, I started an organization called the 2010 Club, which really laid the foundation for so much of the work that I've gone on to do ever since. We provided peer-to-peer support for Black women in business and worked with school students to provide mentoring, and we supported the British government with an enterprise campaign. And I received an MBE for my work 10 years ago in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. And now today, my newest project is my new book. I am the author of Prep, Push, Pivot, Essential Career Strategies for Underrepresented Women. My publisher, Wiley, acquired the worldwide rights to my book. It was released in the United States, Canada, and Australia in January, and it debuted in the UK last month. It's been called one of the recommended books of the year by Cosmopolitan and Refinery 29. My career has taken me to so many incredible places, and there have been so many poignant moments, but it all began 25 years ago at Leicester, when I embarked on my joint honours degree in politics and economic and social history. And as I reflect on the past 25 years, I've come to realize I've had a tendency to move to places that begin with the letter L. I went to Leicester and then London and then Los Angeles. And each of those moves really required substantial leaps of faith. 25 years ago, when I headed to Leicester, that was such a pivotal moment for me. I actually didn't think I was going to go to university at all. I was really struggling during my final year at school. I was doing 5 A-levels. I didn't think that further education was for me, and I didn't apply when all of my friends did. Luckily, I came to my senses within a few months and submitted some late applications. And my number one choice was Leicester. And when I received an offer from Leicester, that was the first time that I felt, oh my goodness, someone believes in me and my potential. And I have an offer here to do the 2 subjects that mean the world to me, politics and history. And I secured the grades that were needed. And off I went. And that really changed everything for me. And it's so dear to me that I still have all of my textbooks from 25 years ago. These books have moved 10,000 miles with me across the Atlantic twice. Leicester was where I learned to form my own opinions and use my voice. You know, I studied Russian politics and French politics and society and African history and the American political process and South African politics. While I was doing my South African politics module, I actually visited South Africa and Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated, and had the opportunity to come back and talk to my professor about that experience. And just such an informative and wonderful time for me, and so much fun too. So many memories from Reagan's, the 80s night that used to be at the Students' Union, and the Redfern, which was the Student Union Bar, which I believe is no longer there anymore. I loved everything about my time at Leicester. I really thrived, and I secured my 2-1 degree a little early. And that gave me the opportunity in my final semester to really think about what I was going to do next. And I decided to pursue a career in public relations, but I was actually planning to stay in the Midlands, either in the West Midlands, where I'd been raised, or in the East Midlands, where I was. And by sheer chance, the paper that I would read, The Guardian, on Mondays, the Media Guardian, had a section which would always have media and communications jobs, and very rarely entry-level jobs. But on one Monday, I saw an entry-level job advertised, and I decided to apply for it, even though it was in London, where I didn't intend to be. And I got called to interview, and one of the people who interviewed me was a Leicester alumni, Ian Kitts, and I actually received an offer from the firm in London, but I wasn't going to accept it because I didn't think that's what I was supposed to do. One of my friends convinced me I should accept it, and I'm so glad that she did. And that a Leicester alum, Ian, became one of my first bosses. And the University of Leicester actually provided me with the very first opportunity I ever had to talk about my career at a speaking engagement. A few months after I graduated and had started my job in London, I was invited back to Leicester by the politics department to talk to the final year undergrads about how I'd found my job in London and what that experience was like. No one had ever asked me to talk about anything before. And I'll always remember that moment. And so from London, 5 years later, I moved to Los Angeles, which was an even bigger leap for me. I transferred with the company that I was working with, and I was adamant I would only be here for 1 year. Well, here we are, 17 years later. I've moved to Los Angeles twice in that time, and I'm now a dual UK and US citizen. I can now vote here. And 3 years ago, when Kamala Harris, who is now vice president, but 3 years ago when she was running for the presidency, I served on her Southwest Finance Committee and co-hosted an event for her here in Los Angeles. It was such a full circle moment for me as a politics graduate, as a new citizen who was about to vote here for the first time, and as a mother of 2 daughters, having the opportunity to introduce them both to the woman who was going to go on to become the first female vice president of the United States. Really was just a moment I'll never forget. And in my book, Prep, Push, Pivot, there's a quote that I share from Kamala Harris about what it takes to break barriers as an underrepresented woman, whether you are running for the presidency or whether you are trying to get that first foothold into your next role, or if you're trying to get that promotion and take that next step. And what she shared really stayed with me, which is that breaking barriers hurts. You often don't just break the barrier and move on to the next, it's breaking something. And that has really stayed with me. And as a coach, I'm really proud to be the person who can support others as they are breaking barriers of their own. So I'm so honored to be here today. Leicester laid the foundation for so much for me. It's where I developed my work ethic. It's where I learned how to meet deadlines. It's where I learned how to think bigger. It's where I learned how to take leaps of faith. And without my degree, I would never have secured a work visa, which led to my green card, which led to my citizenship. And 25 years later, it feels so special to be here reflecting on this journey. So thank you so much.
Wow, Octavia, I don't know about our audience, but certainly I'm truly in awe. And I tell you why I am. We often talk about we often talk about as alum being, you know, when you're about to graduate, being a global citizen, right? And I remember those words so very vividly at my graduation, and just listening to your story is such an ode to that, such a testament to that. The fact that you speak about Leicester University experience being such a big part of your formative years, learning who you are. But I think in all the bits and bobs that you mention, I just feel like it developed that global citizen feeling, that embracement of all, and actually really reaching and stretching your fingertips as far as you can. And I think some of the most incredible experiences that you've had, that you've just so graciously shared with us, are an absolute testament to that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, I'm already in awe. That's absolutely crazy. But anyways, let's continue. That takes us really nicely actually into the second part of our event, as I'm sure we're keen to gain some of the career development insights that you referred to in your book, which I actually recently picked up myself, and I cannot wait to read it a bit more. But so Octavia, let's get straight into the questions really. In this current climate, with the ever-changing needs of people, as we all know, it feels like there's a lot of competition between organizations, essentially trying to attract and retain their best talent. And as you mentioned, you were a career coach yourself. Do you have any advice on ways that organizations can really listen and retain their diverse talent in 2022 and beyond?
Oh, absolutely. And I know corporations all over, this is a #1 priority for so many organizations are even tying diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics to the performance and compensation of their senior executives. And that's because we're hired at lower rates, we're promoted at lower rates, we're retained at lower rates, and we're paid at lower rates. So we need all the support we can get. And of course, making sure that you are hiring diverse talent matters, but you've got to not only retain that talent, but you have to support and advance that talent. You know, in my book, Prep, Push, Pivot, I share a study that had been done by Working Mother Media that found that only 46% of multicultural women had attended a meeting with senior executives within a 2-year period, compared to 63% of white women. So for employers who are working so hard to hire, really look at what you need to do to close the opportunity gaps for your hires, to set those individuals up for success, to thrive not only in the role that they have, but what they want to do next. Invest in professional development. Now, as a coach, I have the opportunity to work with companies who provide one-on-one coaching for their underrepresented professionals who are rising stars at their organizations, not just for their onboarding period, but I work with companies that make that commitment for that entire first year of that person's hire. I work with organizations that provide workshops. Sometimes I'm speaking to 1,000 people at a time on a career advancement topic, or in smaller groups. I do a lot of work with employee resource groups. And I think a lot of employers are starting to recognize the employees that raise their hands to provide peer-to-peer support in their affinity and employee resource groups are also doing a double duty here, because they're doing their day jobs and they're also providing a safe space to connect with others. And one of the ways you can reward that double duty is invest in the professional development of the people that are doing that. And also, when it comes to their performance reviews, recognize that contribution that they are making and include that as an incentive in their compensation. And pay equity is incredibly important. You know, before the pandemic, it was projected that it was going to take a century to close the pay gap between men and women. That's completely unacceptable. That's beyond my daughter's lifetimes. So a commitment to pay equity, being an advocate, investing in professional development, and also we put a lot of emphasis on mentoring and sponsorship. That is incredibly important. It's been so important to me in my career. It's been so important to me as an author, but also consider reverse mentoring. You know, pair your senior executives with more junior members of your teams and listen and learn from those individuals and broaden your connections and your perspectives. That's some of the advice that I have.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what I really appreciate is the fact that unfortunately, there's just not one way of doing things, right? And so, as you mentioned, there are so many thoughts and facets that are involved with being able to make people, well, not only bring the commitment, like you said, but just make people feel like they are heard. And I absolutely could not agree more with your sentiment around being part of employee resource groups, but then trying to do your job without finding the recognition. It almost feels like a double-edged sword, because you're like, well, I want to, but at the same time, can I? Because I'm not being recognized for what it is that I want to do, as opposed to what I've been asked to do. And so, yeah, no, that, yeah, lots of thought there. Thank you for that. So, next question. Many people, including myself probably, work really, really hard in the hope that we kind of almost wait for our bosses to kind of notice the hard work that we've kind of got, you know, achieved or done. Yeah. Do you think this is really the right approach, or should we be stepping out from the shadows?
We definitely need to step up, especially now more than ever. So many of us are adapting rapidly to new ways of working, whether that's remotely, back in the office, hybrid. So many organizations have had changes of structures and leadership. And so doing your work and doing a good job, of course, is paramount and consistent, but you should not assume that just because you are continuing to do the best that you can and to deliver on all your responsibilities, that people will be aware of everything that you bring to the table. And, you know, I wrote an article recently for Harvard Business Review on how to really plan with intent for any one-on-one meeting that you might have with your manager. But also, I encourage the people that I work with to think about every opportunity that you have, every team meeting that you have, every conversation, to really think about what you want to be known for. And I know this from my own experience, but I see it so often as well with the people that I work with. If you do not ask, you will not get. And you often have to ask more than once. You often have to demonstrate why you're making that ask. And you have to ask, and you have to ask, and you have to ask. And also, you want to be asking open-ended questions that can help you learn more about what you want to do next, or what you want to experience in your career, or projects you might want to be a part of, or connections that you might want to make. Now, we're not always in periods in our career where we're trying to be promoted or we're trying to take on more. Sometimes we're just trying to get through the day and trying to learn or adjust, regardless of what stage you're at in your career and regardless of how senior you are. What you do matters. And it's really important to communicate what you bring to the table. And the first way that you can do that really is by tracking yourself, your accomplishments. Even if no one's asking you, keep track of those things. Keep track of what you do. Keep track of what you've overcome. Keep track of what you've learned. Keep track of where you're making a difference. So then when the opportunities do present themselves, you've got a whole body of proof points and examples that you can share.
And that, you know, I think as someone in kind of at the start of my career as well, and I'm sure we've got folks on the call that are in completely different stages of their careers. I think we can all kind of relate in the sense that I personally have really struggled with that, because I'm like, well, I feel like I've done a lot, but I don't really know if I have. And then I had a good mentor of mine, to your original points, it was like, just write it down. I was like, okay, right. And I slowly started writing these things down, perhaps not you know, in the detail that you mentioned, so lots to think about, but certainly turned back maybe a few weeks ago and said, oh, I've actually overcome something that I wouldn't have even comprehended, you know, had I just not even taken the time out to document that. But I think what a great first place to start. And yeah,
I'm so glad you shared that, Jashan, because it can be easy for us to lose perspective because we're all so busy, regardless of our level of seniority. There is so much happening, there's so much, and it's always, what is the next thing we need to do? It can be easy to forget the journey that we've been on. I was asked to reflect on my journey for this conversation, and there were things I'd forgotten until I had to sit down and really think about it. And so we're so busy. When the exercise that you just referenced, that you did, you remembered, and we also, our managers might not just be managing us. They might be managing 5, 10, 20, dozens of individuals. We often remember the things that didn't go well, and it can be hard to remember the things that did sometimes, unless they really stand out. And so think, and if you're a manager yourself, you know this is true. And so it's so important to really document and emphasize. And I remember before I was a career coach, and when I had bosses, I was very not always consistently intentional, but I would do my best to be intentional about that, and guarantee there would be things that my bosses had forgotten, because as leaders, their job is to solve problems. And so the things that were running smoothly and even were running better than expected were maybe a given, but the part that I had played or guided or contributed to or problem solved needed to be brought to the fore. And when I did that, it cements trust. It helps you build your reputation. But more importantly, for you as an individual, it helps you find your career confidence. And that's why it's so important to do.
Yeah, and that piece, that confidence piece, and you're absolutely right. It's just something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to us, because we often focus on the negatives, which actually ties very beautifully into our next question. And I'm really interested to get your take on this, given some of the awesome conversations we've had so far. So we talk about feeling quite negative at points. We talk about not focusing on, not being able to focus so much on the positives, more so on the negatives. And so I think sometimes we can often feel stuck in our roles, in our careers. How do you know, or how do you explore or find your purpose, your worth, when you feel like the odds are stacked against you?
Yeah, so there's two parts to your worth that I want to talk about. And the first part is, and I opened my book with this premise, which is about knowing your worth and cementing your career values, because your career is unique to you. It's yours. You are making the investment in it. It's yours, and you might change what you do, but it's yours and no one else's. And if you have the fortune of having a great manager and a great support network, it's still your journey. No one else will know how that journey feels. And if you don't always have perhaps the support that you need, it becomes even more important to really have those anchors. And so it's getting really clear on what you need to either do your best work or to explore doing your best work. And a lot of that can come from trial and error. And sometimes we've tried some things and we realize pretty quickly, oh, that wasn't for me. Or I want to do less of that. I really think I want to do more of this. It could even be that, knowing what you need to let go of and what you want to explore more of, and how you want to feel and what environments you need to be in. And when you're very early in your career, this can be a really hard thing to do. I know that because I was there. You don't know what you don't know. You want to have an opportunity. You want to break into something. And the minute that you do, it's really important to then really reflect on how it feels and what you want to try and what you want to do more of, and keep that as you continue to grow. And knowing your worth matters, because people will be so quick to put you in a box, not necessarily for bad reasons. Oh, Jashan's great at this, or Octavia's great at that. And that's good if that's what excites you too. But it might be there's way more you can bring to the table. There could be that there's things that you want to try that no one knows unless you can communicate those things, starting with you and then out to others. And sometimes when you apply for roles or share what you want to do, that isn't reflected back at you. You might hear a no. There might not be interest in supporting you. That's when it matters even more. If you know something is important to you, hold on to that. And knowing your worth also has a financial value to it, in terms of what we earn matters.
Hmm.
It matters. And so it's really important to do your research in terms of knowing, regardless of your level of seniority, what the market value is for what you do. Luckily now, it wasn't the case 20 years ago when I was in the early stages of my career, but today there are so many resources online that you can use to get benchmarks. They might be really broad ranges, but that can give you benchmarks in terms of what you should be earning. Forge connections with industry associations and talk to people who are a few years ahead of you and get their take on what salary brackets could be if you're looking for a new role or to advance, and be really clear about that. You know, I just saw a tweet yesterday from someone I don't know talking about her daughter who's been working at a company earning X amount per hour, and her brother applied it to the same company and is being offered more than his sister for the same role. And so it's really important to know the inequity can happen so frequently. It's really important to have conversations and to know what your worth is and to hold on to that. So many coaching clients have come to me in shock when they have found out that people who report to them are poised to be earning more than what they are making. So it's really, really important to do your research continually throughout your career.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's absolutely spot on. And actually, I think that ties really nicely with what you said at the beginning, really, which was kind of along the lines of, if you don't ask, then you don't get, nor you know. And actually, sometimes we feel so obliged to not really say anything and to kind of just hold our guard without actually even appreciating the level of resources that we have around us, where we can actually ground ourselves in a way without having to seek external gratification from those around us in the workplace.
Yes, and if you don't ask, you won't get, but you may not still get the first time you ask.
Exactly.
You may not still get. And that's why it's really important to be clear on your values and what your non-negotiables are.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess with that, Octavia, comes a bit of resiliency. Now, how do you, I mean, I know we've got a little bit of extra time, but I guess we'll just start just from my perspective, you know, with that probably requires a lot of resiliency. And so actually, I guess we could tie this into kind of our last question before we get into Q&A. Can you share any kind of thoughts around that, and possibly any advice as well around how you build a career that aligns with your values and goals?
Oh, absolutely. Building a career is so lonely and so hard. It's I fundamentally believe it's almost impossible to go it alone. It's almost impossible. You know, when I started the 2010 Club, the organization I founded in London, it was because I wanted a circle of other women that I could connect and talk to, and we could support one another. And I know in my whole heart, if you have the ability to work with a coach, that's incredible. But most people don't. Most people don't have someone that will be in their corner that they can talk to about the obstacles that they're facing with their manager or with advancing, or even I support people who have been promoted and are like, Octavia, I don't know what I'm doing. And the people that report into me do not respect me. And I don't know what to do next. There are not many safe spaces where you have to have those conversations. So if you can't work with a coach, do your best to try and find people in your circle. They might not be in the same industry as you, and that's okay, but who could be a sounding board for you. And, you know, it's so difficult to go it alone. You know, I just started a first job in terms of becoming an author. I'd never done this before. Every step that I've had to take on that journey has been a new one for me. I didn't know what it would require. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what the expectations should be. And so for me, talking to other authors who had walked that path before me was just so valuable. And also, you know, hearing no, or things not going the way that you wanted them to, or losing a job, or not getting a job that you wanted, or not getting a promotion. Oh boy, it hurts. It hurts. We're all human, but don't let that setback derail you completely. And I've learned from experience, even though I didn't know it in the moment, that every no will eventually get you closer to a yes.
What a perfect sentiment, because I think we so very quickly. And I guess as well, from my personal perspective, the minute I hear no, it's almost like I fall back into a turtle shell and you're kind of like, I could never do that again. But actually, not holding such momentum to that one no might actually be the little door that kind of changes everything. Like you said, more no, as we go through those no's, it will eventually get us closer to that yes. And actually, if we think about no's like that, then they don't feel as
absolutely. If I had listened to the first no's that I received about my book, there wouldn't be a book.
Yeah.
And so it hurts in the moment, and it doesn't necessarily feel easy to do, but it's what you do next that matters. And everyone's opinions are subjective, and often the validation that comes way after you've done the work. I'm so proud and excited to be talking about my book with you all and others, but the work that I did was over the past 3 years, quietly and on my own, and no one could see it. And that's often the way in our careers. We're laying the foundations, and people don't see what it takes to get up and to show up and to be there on time and to learn but then eventually the validation comes much later. So it's so important to just keep going. And while you're trying to keep going, when you are stumbling or and it's not working out, talk to others. Don't go it alone, and that will really help.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Always a team effort as well.
Yes.
Even from our mental health, from a well-being perspective as well. So just on your book, actually, we've had a few questions as well, and we're going to start a Q&A now. So if you do have any more questions, feel free to send them over in the chat window and we'll get to them. But I thought I'd start off with Q&A with actually, Octavia, could you give us any tips or any advice to alum like myself who would be interested in writing their own books? Do you have any top tips?
Oh, well, first of all, do it. If you want to write, do it. I just say that wholeheartedly. If you have an idea that you want to bring out into the world, just pursue it and just keep going. When I started this process, I didn't know what the end result would be, and it was a little overwhelming to even think about what the end result might be, not so much in terms of what it would be, but what if I failed? What if I wasn't successful? And you have to just put that to one side and then just focus on what's the next step I need to take. And along the way, you will find people who will help you along the way. So focus on what you need to do. Focus on the writing, focus on that. And along the way, you'll find other people who can support you on that journey and help you get where you want to be. And just talk to other authors who have done it. And if there's anyone listening who wants to write a nonfiction book, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to share what I've learned so far from that experience. And I did that with other authors. So just write. Start talking to agents and publishers. If you're considering self-publishing, start exploring the next steps for that, and just commit to doing the next step. And before you know it, you'll have your book.
Awesome. No, that's baby steps. Absolutely.
Yes, baby steps.
Absolutely sentiment to baby steps, which is always brilliant, because if we try and take on that whole thing, that whole cake, it just won't get anywhere, will it? So,
yes.
Very fabulous. Right. So we've had some really, really brilliant questions come in, Octavia.
Great.
I'll get straight to them. First question is from Howard. Thank you for joining us today. Howard says, loved the quote and involvement with US VP Kamala Harris's campaign. However, as leaders or Leicester agents of change, should we be breaking barriers, or rather working to remove them altogether so others don't have to hurdle as much as we might have had to do?
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Howard. I think it's both. And I think it's also, along with that, also recognizing the permission to fail. We don't always break that barrier at the first attempt, and it's not easy to overcome obstacles. It's very rare that there's overnight successes for anything, whether that's an individual in terms of their career development, or a corporation that's trying to overhaul their culture and how they do work. So I think it's recognizing that and just having the intention that it might be messy. Careers are messy, change is messy, but to have the commitment to try and do the best thing and to learn as we go and to keep moving forward. And community, I think, is a really important part of that. When I think of what the University of Leicester community has delivered for me, you know, in large and small ways. I would love to know how I can pay it forward too. And if we as individuals think of that as, even if we're trying to progress or do things differently, how can we support people that look to us as role models or look to us as being where they want to be? And if we can do that, then we are making a difference.
Beautiful, beautiful. And a really great question as well, Howard. Thank you so much. Another question. This question, Octavia, you have talked about the start of your career this evening. What is the single piece of advice you would give to our graduating class of students as they embark upon their careers?
Oh my goodness, don't let fear stop you from doing anything. You know, fear has stopped me from doing lots of things that I didn't do, but luckily it didn't stop me from doing some of the things that I was so afraid to do. You know, when I saw that ad in the Media Guardian for my first job, I was afraid to reply. But I did, on the assumption that, well, they won't see it. Well, I got the job. When I moved to Los Angeles, I was afraid to ask for the transfer with my company that actually resulted in my move to Los Angeles. I was petrified of asking. I was thinking, oh my gosh, if I ask, they're going to laugh at me, and then they're going to assume I don't want to be here, and then I'm going to lose my job. And, you know, there was all these cascading thoughts. Yeah. None of those cascading thoughts were true. I asked, and it set a series of steps in motion that resulted in me transferring with my company and receiving a work visa and moving to the United States. When I was working on my book, I was afraid to send out my book proposal to agents. I was absolutely terrified of doing that. So regardless of whatever level, you know, I've been working now for 20 plus years, I still get afraid. So I totally understand how terrifying it can be when you're at the start of your career, but do not let fear stop you. Just do it anyway. And if it doesn't work out, try again and keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And you'll learn something from every step. So just keep going.
Yeah, gosh, yeah, that's something that I'll definitely take from this talk, that idea around feel the fear and do it anyway. So thank you so much, Octavia. We've had another question. This one is from Tom. And Tom says, on a bad day or during a difficult time, how do you keep your energy and motivation high enough to stay on track?
Oh, well, first of all, hi, Tom. And there were lots of times where that is really, really difficult for me. And I find that I have to just switch gears completely. Meditating really helps for me. That's something I discovered during the pandemic. I wish I'd discovered that decades ago. But that just really, really helps me. And also recognizing when you have a bad day, the next day is a new start, you know, and you never know what's around the corner, good or bad. So let go or learn from what isn't working and just start something new. And also try and make space for what you enjoy. We're often so busy, and I find that especially being here in the United States and, you know, constantly working and constantly busy, but it's really important to just sometimes to stop and just make time for the things that fuel you. And it supports you in so many ways and gives you the fuel to get back up and do the work that matters.
Re-energizing.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, spot on. Thank you so much, Octavia. One more question. I think we might not show up anymore, but this is from Chris. So Chris says, like you, I moved from the UK to Southern California.
Oh, wow.
Lucky for some, goodness me. It's just blustery and horrid here. Dare I say warm? I'm interested in your observations concerning any differences between the barriers you encountered in the UK and the US and your approach to overcome these.
Oh, I love that question, Chris, and love that you're here in Southern California too. And yes, Jashan, we've got 90-degree weather today. It's glorious. So many insights. I had completely underestimated when I moved to the United States 17 years ago how different things would be. I completely underestimated. I assumed I was speaking the same language. I was not. I spent my first few months not being able to understand what most people were saying, especially on conference calls, which was incredibly hard because I led teams that were in different parts of the country and I couldn't hear often what people were asking me. It took me a long time to assimilate. And, you know, I've often been in my career the only Black woman on a project or on a team, or one of very few. And often there I've encountered a underestimation of what I might be able to do, or assumptions. And I'm not alone in that. I listened to an interview with Roz Brewer, who is one of 2 Black female CEOs in the Fortune 500. She's the CEO of Walgreens Boots Alliance. And she was sharing an anecdote at being at a meeting, which was specifically for CEOs, and being asked by another CEO if she ran the marketing team. And she's like, no, I run the company. And so regardless of your level, whether you're in the C-suite or whether you're striving to advance as an underrepresented professional, that is something that I've experienced and I know others encounter. But I think what excites me the most about the perspective that I have from having worked in different parts of the world are just the opportunities that can be there, and how important it is not to put your own ceiling on what you want to do, regardless of what other people's perceptions might be of you, and to just really embrace every opportunity that you have. And I've learned a lot more about myself from taking myself out of various comfort zones, and I'm constantly learning, especially as a parent who is raising children in a completely different educational system to the one that I progressed through. Every day is a learning experience. And so I really embrace that. And I feel very privileged to be able to maintain a dual citizenship and have both really rich experiences to draw upon. And I'd love to know where you are in Southern California. So I hope you can put that in the chat so I can see.
Yes, please do, Chris. And yeah, 90-degree weather over the blusteriness any day. But no, thank you so much for such an enlightening answer. Even though I'm a UK citizen, I felt like I took a lot from that as well, Octavia, actually appreciating the differences, even though they feel a little bit prickly at the start. So yeah, thank you for that. One more question, I think. So we've had another question. You've already touched upon not expecting your hard work to be noticed and to ensure you put yourself forward. But how do you deal with situations where decisions are based on existing relationships rather than experience?
Yes. So one of the things I talk about in Prep, Push, Pivot is about how important it is to cultivate advocates for your career or sponsors in your workplace. And that observation is so correct. Relationships matter. And you can't necessarily cultivate those relationships overnight. So I think you have to be really intentional about communicating what you want to do next. And it might not be that you're going to do it next week or next month, but if you communicate regularly, even if the people who are hearing it aren't the people who can open the door for you, they'll be keeping you front of mind and asking about spaces that you might need, or you might want to be in, or connections that you need to forge, and not necessarily having an expectation that you might immediately develop a sponsor. But quite often, and I found this, there are people that talk about you even when you don't know. There are people who might recommend you or suggest you who you don't know that they've had that conversation with someone else. And the reason they've done that is because they see something in you, but they also know. They know what you want to do next. And so I have found in my career, I am recommended for speaking engagements or clients by people who I had no idea had a connection to that organization or that individual, but they know what I do and they know what I'm interested in. And they spoke up for me. And the same can happen in workplaces. And if you don't have that in your workplace, don't forget your broader community, your alumni community, your professional, community, your industry, your local community. There are so many touching points that you are part of. And it can be easy to forget that, especially when, you know, so many of us have just been at home or not connecting, you know, over the past few years in the way that we maybe used to. So many people have maybe started new roles over the course of pandemic and are trying to make new connections in completely new spaces. So just remember, there is more around you than you might realize. And just be really intentional about what you want to do and sharing what you're interested in, and the ripple effects can start to help you.
Almost speak for themselves, which
yes,
is completely underestimate. No, brilliant. Right. I think we've got time for 2 more questions, and then we'll probably love to hear a little bit more about your book. So, question from Howard. I'm a HR director, and in my experience, career coaching is much about leadership development. Octavia, what is your own leadership philosophy?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I personally, I constantly challenge myself to learn and to explore new things. And I personally, that's what excites me the most. So on my own journey, it's what do I want to do more of? What am I not so good at? Why do I want to advance my own skills? As a coach, I love identifying with people where their gaps might be, and also where they shine, and how can we amplify where they shine, and where can we support where those gaps might be, to help them advance. And, you know, I personally am looking for my next challenge. You know, I wrote this book and I'm so excited, but now I want to learn something new. I want to have another new journey, because I find that fuels me. And I'm also very intentional about mentoring too. I was on the committee that started the inaugural mentoring program for the Royal Society of Arts Fellows here in the United States. And I learned so much from mentoring and supporting others. So much. So that helps me with my own leadership and development too. And that's why I advocate reverse mentoring as well, because the people I mentor and support might not realize how much value they're adding to me, but they really are. They really are. The conversations and the perspectives and the reflections really help me.
Fantastic. Yeah. Power of voice, power of language, but being able to just share each other's perspectives, regardless of where you've come from, is probably totally underestimated, but brilliant. Right, I think final question, as we are really running for time now. Hi, Octavia. In the world of remote working, how can we best showcase our successes to our bosses or senior figures in our organizations that would have maybe been more apparent in an office setting?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I saw a study that showed for people who are remote working, oh my goodness, the number of meetings has increased so much. And that is a blessing and a curse, because often it might feel, well, I'm just one of many. How do I show what I'm doing? And so I wrote an article about this exact topic recently. And I think in advance of any meeting that you have, what's a takeaway I want the person that I'm meeting with to have about me or my work or my contribution, and really have that front of mind. A bit like, you know, when you go into a job interview, you're thinking about, what do I want to make sure comes through here? We have to remember that when we're in our meetings. And that can be easy to forget, especially when we have so many meetings. But there might be a couple of meetings or opportunities that you have on your calendar that matter more than others. It could be that one-on-one with your manager. It could be that weekly team meeting. It could be the monthly check-in or the 3-monthly check-in, or whatever you have. Be really intentional about those opportunities, and do your own work in between to keep tracking what you're doing or what you're bringing to the table, or questions that you have, or problems that you might want to help solve, or problems you have solved, and communicate those things. And also, where you see other people's accomplishments or contributions, communicate those things too. And where you see things where you might be able to help or support, ask open-ended questions. And we're also busy, and there aren't always times where we can take on extra responsibilities. And I understand that completely, but don't forget to do what you need to do for your career, because I've been there when I used to have performance appraisals when I didn't think about this in between, and then the year would roll around, I'd be like, oh my goodness, I don't want this meeting, I can't remember what I've done, all I can remember is the thing that didn't go so well. And and it's really hard, especially when you're really busy in your job, to find the time to sit down and do those forms. And then it's even harder when you have direct reports and you're having to do their paperwork too, and their meetings. Your own work often can get lost in the shuffle. Don't let that happen for you. Don't let that happen for you. Try and find the time, even if it's just monthly, just to sit really still and to really reflect. What I do is I keep a document on my computer, and I jot everything down as I think of it or as it happens. And then by the end of the month, I've got some messy notes, but I've got notes that really, really help me. So just carve out the time for you, and don't be afraid to use your voice when the time comes to share what you've been doing.
Wow, and I think that is the most wonderful way to end our Q&A. Goodness me, Octavia, there are so many things that you said that I will absolutely take, and I will probably stay with me for a really long time, as I'm sure our audience also feel the same. So thank you so much for your answers, and thank you to everyone in the audience as well for sharing such brilliant, profound questions. Nearing the end, but we'd love to learn a little bit more about your book, Octavia.
Oh, yes. So Prep, Push, Pivot is available wherever you love to buy books. Of course, Amazon is everywhere, but if you're in the UK, there's also WH Smith's and Waterstones and Foyles. If you're in the US, Barnes and Noble and independent bookstores. So wherever you love to buy books. And if anyone wanted to buy books for their team, my publisher also offers a corporate discount on bulk buys. So please feel free to reach out to me. My personal website is there. Please do reach out to me on LinkedIn to connect if you're on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest as well.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Octavia. I mean, I've got my copy as well, and I honestly cannot wait to keep reading through it. I think there are so many things that even you've mentioned that have already come up in this book, and I'm not even super into it yet, but I absolutely look forward to giving it a thorough read and probably prompting with questions after. So thanks for that. Right, folks, we've got 3 minutes to go. I guess on that note, first and foremost, a massive gracious thank you, Octavia, for your thoughts, for your wisdom, and for taking the time to join us this evening. As an absolute thank you is also due to everyone on this call today for attending such a brilliant session. Just a few notes from me before we round off. Octavia, before I give you just the floor to just end off the session. Folks, we were going to be having a post-event evaluation form, which is already in the chat window. So feel free to kind of answer it. We'd really appreciate it. As with every evaluation form, it will honestly help us improve events in the future. And we'll also be sending the evaluation form in a follow-up email. And yeah, we'll be keeping the meeting live for a few minutes to give everyone the opportunity to kind of fill it in. So by all means, but before we say anything, Octavia, any final words from you?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jashan. Thank you to everyone who was here today. If you have any follow-up questions from me, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you to the University of Leicester. It just feels so poignant to be here 25 years after I embarked on my degree. So proud to be a graduate. So thank you for everything.
And on that note, folks, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much again, Octavia. And I'm very, very humbled that the one thing that brings us all together is actually the fact that we've all fallen from the same tree and at the university. Yes. So yeah, no, it makes me ever prouder. To wherever you are in this world, do take care and hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.